Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 2 of the PPM Summit Philadelphia. It's a great honor to welcome you on another exciting day. I'm glad to be joined by Mithun and Sachin for the first session of the day. Before we begin, I would like to recognize the partners of this PPM Philadelphia Summit for making this event possible. Now, thank you to our strategic partners, Enrich Analytics, Captario, and Project Widgets, and also our associate partner, Keynote. And now, please do note that our partners are available to you during networking breaks as well as during the day for a quick conversation in the expo area of the event. Now, if you have any questions for our speakers, please do not hesitate to ask them in the stage chat of the event. That's on the top right of your screen. And once you've also been to the expo area, be sure to mingle with our networking feature available in the navigation bar on the left. Now, on behalf of the event organizer Wise Summit, I would like to thank all of our speakers for being part of this exciting event, and I hope that you too, like us, look forward to another exciting day of presentations and panel discussions. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the chairman of the event, Mr. Mithun Merida. Mithun.
Thank you, Tomasz, and hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you for the second day of the PPM Summit in Philadelphia. It's a wonderful day, and we have a lot coming up. Some very interesting keynotes, presentations, panels. We even have a spotlight presentation and something which you haven't seen before. There will be a fireside chat. So very interesting formats and ways of sharing about PPM to you. And I will present you the first speaker, Sachin Raje. He's director at Merck, responsible for setting up and managing the strategy realization office for the transformation initiatives at MRL Global Medical and Scientific Affairs. Sachin leads a team which serves as a management consulting cell within GMSA. Sachin is a published author of books on computer-aided design and is invited to speak on a variety of topics, including complex program management and organizational effectiveness. So I invite Sachin to speak, take the stage for the first keynote presentation of the day. So Sachin, that stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Mithun. Thank you very much for that warm introduction and welcome. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening to wherever you are joining from, and thanks for joining us today. If you were in for the sessions yesterday, you got to see what the quality of the presentations that we had yesterday, and I'm certainly looking forward to another exciting day today. All right, so just get started a little bit about me. Mithun was kind enough to talk a few sentences about me, but just a quick thing on to date myself a bit. It's 30 plus years of management consulting experience and program management and project management. So in that, I wrote a couple of books on computer-aided design. And then for a brief while, I started a company for about 8 years in the field of computer-aided design. It was a pioneer in the field of computer-aided design in India. And teaching has always been a passion. So sharing whatever little I know about any subject is something which got me from a few numbers to around 10,000 students that I have had a chance to interact with over my 30 plus years of teaching. Currently, as Mithun mentioned, I manage a team of very talented program managers. I had an occasion to set up the strategy realization office 4 years ago for Merck's Global Medical Affairs, and now it's what's called Global Medical and Scientific Affairs. I also run a not-for-profit organization supporting underprivileged women and children. And music has been a passion. I have been a musician for a number of years, and I also have music performances these days primarily to raise money for the charity. I'm an empty nester, as the term goes, and I live in New Jersey with this little guy. My wife and met this little guy called Archer. So that's enough to get you a little bit of a flavor about me. My picture could not do justice as Arch's would. So here we go. Moving on from this topic today from strategy to execution. So this is something which Gartner has and the likes have taken notice that there is a gap between this notion of strategy and execution, and that gap is going to be filled up in the next 2 years. That was something Gartner wrote about in 2019. So the need to sort of move and fill up that gap between strategy to execution. So John McGrath, a friend of mine, who's a professor in Ireland, had this great quote which I just picked up, which was that an organization is incapable of delivering on its strategic objectives if an organization is incapable. That the strategy is effectively worthless, and the organization should accept their North Star is just based on nothing more than hope and chance. So I thought this was a good place to set up, because oftentimes we in the project management world talk about project management, program management officers, PMOs, and none of those basically have anything to do with the strategy at the top over there. Oftentimes we are handed the projects to run, and there's a little bit of a hope and a chance that the strategies which are up above in the rarefied atmospheres above are translated down correctly. So that's the premise of this particular discussion today, and I would really encourage your comments and your questions in the chat function. All right, so let's just talk a little about how the PMO evolved, and as you might recall, in the early days, there was a term called project office, and this came about in the 1930s in the US Air Force at the time, when they wanted to sort of get a little better handle on the number of things that they were managing together to get certain things in place. So the project office then fast forwarded to the goal through all of this, as you can see, was basically to have projects basically get to manage them a little better and more consistently. So the next term which we came up with was a system program office, and this was something which was seen in the 50s as something which gained traction for a little while, and then moved on to what we know called a project management office in the 60s, and towards the late 60s you had the PMI coming on. So the project management as a function became something which could be consolidated, called a project management office. And then we had the program management office in the 90s somewhere, and when you talk about the program management office, this is not a one and done kind of a thing. There are multiple flavors of the program management office, right? So we have the enterprise PMO, we have a functional PMO, you could have a PMO which has been set up for a particular event, such as a divestiture of a company, which is a large event, but something like that, which a PMO is set up at multiple levels. There's a PMO for managing consistency of projects. There's a multiple flavors of PMOs that we've seen across. But what's common across all of them is it's largely focused on increasing levels of controls and efficiency. So it's basically making the assumption that the projects that you've got are all great and perfect, and hence they have to be managed perfectly and controlled well. So that's the sort of view of the world of program management offices. But if you see now that there's a bit of an evolution which is coming about, and that's around the fact that there's a move towards going a little higher, if you will, and that's the having a strategy realization office getting a PMO getting morphed into a strategy realization office. And what the difference over there, in a nutshell, is the strategy realization office is a little more focused on the alignment with the goals and the strategy. So this is one thing which is coming on over here. So if you were to sort of distill that a little further, the PMO view of the world, we just talked about how it is something which is focused on making sure that there are better controls and better efficiency. But the PMO view of the world focuses around things like, multiple projects which are to be managed consistently. So what's the scope of the projects, the deliverables of the projects? These are, common words in PMOs and projects everywhere. the kind of deliverables, timelines are important, sacrosanct, in fact, milestones, and making sure that we don't miss out on those timelines and milestones is something which is tracked very effectively. Of course, the words like risk and issues and dependencies and constraints and all of those happy words that we all use all the time, those are in the view, in the world view of the PMO. And of course, many of us have costs as something which you watch hawkishly as one of the things in the PMOs. And of course, finally, it's the question of the resources which are handled. Now, in this case, typically, the resources which we talk about are the resources which are within the PMO. So if you're talking about various project managers being a part of the PMO, when we talk about the resource allocation and how the resources are basically handled, we are thinking in terms generally of the project management resources that we've got over here. Sure, you could have the other resources, the functional resources which participate in your projects also put in over there, and you could be managing their allocation and their utilization also from the PMO. But that's generally the view of the world. Again, the view of the world is that you have the programs, you have the projects which have been splitting out from there. There's some thought about how to do that, and then there's a question of how to manage those time for a particular how to manage those projects from the timelines perspective. The other view of the world which with PMOs do is the notion of dashboards and templates and standards and controls. So it's all a collection of the information, making sure that you have a consistent set of tools and templates that you use. You're doing things in a standard way. You're using vocabulary which makes sense. Now, I'm not trivializing any of this. This is all important, and this is certainly one of the most important things to do to make sure that you're efficiently managing a program. But what's different over here is, of course, that the program is a given, and then you start managing it more effectively. So the view of the world starts from the program itself being given to the PMO, and from there on, it basically cascades it down into projects and work streams and so forth. So if you were to take it then a different view of it, and that's the management view. So if you've got the management of the company, what they look at it is they come from the perspective of there's a vision somewhere. So some vision is set, and the senior manager rallies around that vision. Those vision is translated into goals, the next level down, and there are of course suitable metrics to say, are we on track with this to achieving those goals? How will we know that we've achieved those goals? What are the metrics that we have got today, and how are we going to managing them in the future? And then, of course, strategies are developed to achieve those goals, oftentimes with the help of management consulting firms and with an internal talent as well. And that's where it stops. So now you have the management view of the world, which basically looks from the top and says, this is where we're going to be heading. They're outward looking. They're looking out over the horizon, setting their goals, setting the strategies to get to those goals. And somewhere magically now you're expecting to have those goals and strategies translated into programs and projects which the project management team can handle. And of course, the most important thing which the management comes out with is, hey, just get this done. I don't care how you do it. This is the timeline I want to get this done by. And obviously, I'm exaggerating a touch, but this is typically what tends to be. And of course, every so often they'll check back and say, hey, is it done yet? I mean, are we there yet? The classic children sitting in the back seat statement. So this is the management view of the world. So what is the gap then? So you talked about the executive management view of the world, which talks about outward looking and focusing on the outside and sort of getting the goals and strategy. And then you have the program management, which basically does this thing. And the gap in the middle, and mind this gap over here, is strategy execution, right? How do you convert that strategy downwards and make sure that it gets handled effectively? I talked last year at another place where we talked about how do you convert an esoteric vision or a two-line vision and convert it into a set of tangible programs and projects which can be done. But that's one of the sort of gray areas or places where this gap becomes significant, and that's the gap that is being that is being filled up by what we call the SRO. So the strategy realization office, and this is by design, that it kind of touches into the executive management side and goes down all the way into the PMO space. The strategy realization office kind of elevates its game in just a touch, and what it really does over here is starts from facilitating the strategic planning session. So again, the strategy executive management sits on the strategy side, yes, surely, but facilitating that strategic plan to get an understanding of that is something which the SRO has now started to skirt into, and this is something which companies have started getting into the moving from a PMO into an SRO have started doing effectively. The SRO then comes in and sort of says, looks at all the body of goals and metrics and strategy which has been put together, and tries to look through it to say, what are the stuff over here which can be purely done through operational improvement to improve those goals and those metrics over there, and what can actually lends itself to a project. Now, as we all know, a project is something which has got a start and an end and a specific purpose. So that's what you try to look at and say, oh, this is something which lends itself to a project. Let me see what we can do with this. They define and the criteria of how to prioritize these projects, and then basically go ahead and carve out the projects and programs that are likely to have the most impact. So of course, keep in mind that if you've got a large set of goals and specific metrics which are going to be supporting those goals, the projects which might come out of that may be a significant number of projects, right? So the important thing over there is not to do all of them, because again, the 80-20 rule comes into the picture, but that's where you sort of prioritize the projects which have got the greatest of impact. And the focus is not just on deliverables and milestones. The focus is on benefits and outcomes. Now, I'm sure this term is not new to everybody. We have been, talking about the word benefits and outcomes for the last at least 10 years in the industry. So the word benefits is something which instinctively people seem to understand, but doesn't get translated into programs quite as much when it comes to management of programs and projects. And it's certainly spotty or sketchy across the landscape. So this is one of the things which the SRO sort of strives to take on and take in its stride. And the final thing is managing resources, and the management of resources over here is not just the project resources, but it's also the management of functional resources which are required to execute those projects. So one of the biggest advantages of looking at benefits, for example, is the fact that benefits by definition has a beneficiary. And if you have a beneficiary, then you can engage out the beneficiaries to say, hey, I have a program or a project that I'm putting into place that's going to benefit you in this way, and that's obviously tied up to the goals and the strategy of the company, and that's something which I need your help to basically get me over the line, because the beneficiary is you. So the benefits and the beneficiaries basically helps you also to look outwards and reach out to people and ask for the skin in the game to produce the kind of projects which you need for you to succeed and further the strategy, but for the beneficiary also to get the benefit from the project that you're putting together. So this is one thing where you can manage the resources which they might need to provide. Suppose you need subject matter expertise from a functional group, you can have the subject matter expertise coming on to you if you can point out to them that this is going to be a benefit to you and your group in some shape or form, right? So this is another view of the world, which basically is a little more wider view to say, if this entire outcome is to be better, there are going to be benefits which are going to be shared across a different set of stakeholders, and those stakeholders can come in and basically start helping in getting these projects and programs better off the ground. The SRO can manage that and execute the projects a little more effectively. So coming on to the differences, right? So this is where there obviously there's a Venn diagram of the PMO and the SRO functionality, and but there is some very clear differences in what the SRO is chartered to do and what the PMOs traditionally have done, even at the different levels. And again, PMOs have a wide range of sort of PMOs that we know exist. There are enterprise PMOs, like I said, and functional PMOs and IT PMOs and so forth. So each of those basically are focused on program value, cost management, timely delivery, very tangible stuff, which is there, numerically driven stuff. While as the SROs focus on the alignment to the strategy and the goals of the organization, right? So that top-down view, so it's just a different lens, right? To say, if you're going to look at it at projects from the top and say, that's the strategy, that's the set of goals that we need to achieve, and this is what translates downwards into the projects that we need to do. Sure, obviously this in some shape or form without the SRO also, you could argue that this is somebody is sitting and doing them. SRO is just a more formalized structure to basically enable that process a little bit. From a PMO perspective, they ensure program success, deliverables, and milestone focus. So it's like we talked about the various things that the PMOs focus on. That's something which is handled by the PMOs. While as the SROs focused, as I said, on the benefits realization piece and in the context of the goals. So benefits, as I've always liked to say, is not something which gets realized when the project ends, or just like you have deliverables which sort of have a specific time in which they are delivered. Benefits can be realized, as you can imagine, throughout the project. In some cases, at the beginning of the project, and in some cases, 10 years after the project has been completed. And that's the distinction, of course, between tracking it from a benefits perspective or tracking it from a milestone perspective. There have been programs or projects which basically have been scrapped after starting, for 6 months, and then sort of scrap it, and they don't even complete the project. Yet some of the key benefits have already been realized, because what you might need to get started on over there in getting the project to that 6-month stage is already a benefit which has been accrued to the company itself. And I have examples of that which I've seen in my own experience, where benefits are realized even though some benefits are realized even though the project might get cancelled. So the point here is SRO looks at it from the lens of benefit realization in the context of the goals which are there. In a PMOs, the program are kind of pre-selected for you, and hence the focus is on successful completion. Very, very important thing here. In the SROs, the focus is on selection of the projects, and the programs are rationalized based on the gaps in the strategy execution. So you're looking at it and saying, what are the things that we have as gaps within our strategy, and what do we need to do to fill those gaps, to make sure that our goals can get achieved. That's the sort of vision and the focus where the SRO comes from. And of course, PMOs executes the portfolio of projects, and that's true for the SRO too. So like there are SROs which are being set up, which are grown-up PMOs, if you will, and they continue to be also responsible for the execution of projects. So not only do they help pick the most significant projects to execute, but they also actually execute the projects themselves. So that's what the sort of trend is moving towards. Not to have a completely different arm which just focuses on strategy and execution downwards, and have PMOs run it, but to actually have the PMOs develop into SROs, and that's the trend which is now coming on, and certainly has been noted by various think tanks, at least over the last couple of years. So what's the bottom line? Let me just lay down for you, right? So companies are beginning to take notice and are moving to a more strategy execution mode by setting up the SROs. Doesn't mean that strategy did not get executed before with the PMO, but it's just that the lens is one of coming up from the strategy side downwards, and it seems to be a better way to go. It's a more robust way of ensuring that you have the right kind of projects, and that the projects are done right, because the PMOs have got their own sort of mechanism of managing projects also. The second thing which is there is that the SROs support the strategy execution, starting with the prioritizing of the initiatives that need to be done first. And for the SROs to succeed, the following attributes are necessary. And then it's, as they say, it's necessary, but not necessarily, this is not the all-encompassing list over here. So firstly, a voice in facilitating the strategic planning process. They themselves, the SRO, must have well-established project management processes and tools. So it's not as if it's a separate organization from the PMO, which does not, it's a different view of the world. It's just an extension of that. So the fact that you have your project management skills is a given. It has to be in place. Facilitation and change management skills. This is probably a bit of an addition, but not necessarily completely out in the left field from what a standard a PMO would do, especially a good one. But change management skills certainly are something which are helpful in making sure that this benefit realization and outcome management part of things are handled a little better. So SROs tend to have change management as one of the as one of the skills which is there in their arsenal. And of course, a skilled and experienced team of project managers, because again, like I said before, this is not something which can be done without the PMO-like thing that you have currently within companies. So bottom line again is not every PMO needs to become an SRO. Certainly there's a trend that many PMOs are heading towards becoming SROs, but both they have their own independent uses. PMOs can be started off in the setup and they are kind of disbanded and move on. So that's why they also sort of have a life of their own. For example, we just recently had one where we had a divestiture of a company, in which case the PMO was set up to essentially start and manage the divestiture process completely end to end, and it had multiple layers of the PMO, and then it kind of, as the divestiture completed, that PMO kind of dissolved and became something else. So that's why PMOs are in that sense different. There's no strategy involved in that. It is something which was handed down as a thing to be done, and the PMO beautifully got it done by executing it through all the things which you talked about that a PMO usually does. An SRO is more for strategic initiatives, getting them the strategy across the line and the strategic execution. So there's a slightly different kind of a thing. Not every company has to have a PMO morphing into an SRO, but certainly that's one of the ways you can sort of bridge the gap between strategy and execution. All right. So with that, I'm going to take a stop, and I know I'm conscious of the time. So Mithun, I'm going to turn it over to you and see if there are any questions which I can answer.
Thank you, Sachin. It was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I really liked the idea of getting the happy words, and actually we could even be lost using all those happy words. And really good reminder to have those dates and of the different phases of development of PMO. I mean, where we came from, and also how to move from PMO to SRO. I have been in a lot of these discussions, especially with practitioners from the UK on the P3O model, where actually they are very much recommending both having different levels of PMO, some temporary offices, some permanent offices, and where SROs could be very helpful. So a lot of discussions are being ongoing on these topics. We have one question from Andreas. Is there a difference between SRO and portfolio management?
That's a very good question. So yeah, so portfolio management, again, it depends on how. There is a lot of depends in some of these answers, right? So not every company does portfolio management the same way, just like not every company does a PMO the same way, right? So there are flavors and flavors and flavors of every one kind. But so portfolio management by definition would be that you manage all the portfolio of all the projects that you've got, including the various programs that you've got that you've set up over there. The question here is, does the portfolio management also involve looking at strategy and taking the strategy downwards? The gap which I'm talking about is that management itself tends to be so focused on outwards that they are not necessarily always perfectly capable of slicing and dicing that strategy and that vision onto a portfolio, right? Somebody needs to translate what needs to get done and send them downwards, and that's the part which is what the SROs seem to be fitting in over here. So again, you could argue that the portfolios which you've got can do exactly the same function because they have a seat at the table, and which if they don't have the seat at the table, then you have a different kind of a problem. So the SROs over here are the focus of it is looking at from management, taking that management vision and slicing it downwards, bringing it from a strategic level into an execution level downwards, and then converting that strategy into actionable projects and programs. So
Great. We have two more questions, but I guess we would have to unfortunately move to the next session. So maybe Sachin, you could respond directly in the chat.
sure.
And thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. So we'll be going backstage, and I'll be back with the panel in a minute. So please stay tuned.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.